Hello and welcome to New Jersey Politics with Laura Jones. I am Laura Jones and we are so glad to have you here. Election Day 2023 in New Jersey is now history, and Democrats were able to hold on to the line, keeping control of their legislative majorities in the Senate and Assembly. They also flipped some pivotal seats despite the party's not so great performance in 2021. Democrat John Berzicelli defeated Republican Ed Durr down in the 3rd District. You might recall the truck driver from South Jersey stunned the established Democrats last election by beating former State Senate President Steve Sweeney in a race no one expected he would win. Democrats are saying their win is attributed to their focus on abortion and reproductive rights, while Republicans focus more on parental rights in the schools. Now that 2023 is a wrap, the race for governor 2025 in New Jersey is already underway. Today we're going to be talking with Jack Ciattarelli, the Republican who ran twice for governor and almost beat Governor Phil Murphy back in 2021. We're going to see what he has to say about the upcoming race and what his plans are this time around. First up, Steve Fulop is a Democrat and mayor of Jersey City. He's held that spot for 10 years. Back in the spring, he was the first one to officially announce that he's running for governor, and we are delighted to have him on the show. Mayor, it's so nice to see you. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you for having me, Laura.
Yes, well, first things first, let's talk about the election. It was a big win for Democrats. So can you recap some of the big wins for the night, maybe starting down in South Jersey with Ed Durr, who lost to former Assemblyman John Berzicelli?
Let me start by saying it was a big night for Steve Sweeney and the South Jersey Democrats, as they're clearly back in the game and more relevant. But I think the bigger thing than what you saw in South Jersey is just that the state is becoming more and more blue. I know Republicans like to highlight that it's a purple state, that they have the opportunity to win in statewide elections. But if you look back to the last 10 years, there just hasn't been any examples of them winning substantive races other than 2021, which was more a reflection of individual municipal and legislative races as opposed to a countywide or statewide trend. So when you think about Jack Ciattarelli and his 2 times running for office, I would, venture to say that what you saw in 2021 was his ceiling, not his floor. Not a lot of growth potential there.
Yeah. So when Ed Durr ousted State Senate President Steve Sweeney, and like you mentioned, Jack Ciattarelli, he came close to beating Governor Phil Murphy. Many were expecting, with this being the midterm, so to speak, of New Jersey politics, they were expecting the Republicans to do better. Maybe not necessarily pick up a lot of seats, but it seemed, some would say, close to kind of a disaster for Republicans.
Yeah, I mean, look, in 2021, the reality is that Jack Ciattarelli probably should have beat Phil Murphy based on historical trends. New Jersey usually trends just like Virginia. In Virginia, we saw Terry McAuliffe running for governor and Glenn Youngkin close a 30-point gap as the Republican and win. In New Jersey, it was exactly a different sort of scenario here, where you saw Jack Ciattarelli come close but lose. And I think it speaks to a larger trend in New Jersey, that we're just becoming more of a blue state and no longer a purple state like Virginia.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about the overall winners and perhaps losers of election night? You mentioned it was a big win for Steve Sweeney, but what about the Senate President, Assembly Speaker, George Norcross, Phil Murphy?
I think clearly George Norcross and Steve Sweeney, a win for them. I think Vin Gopal, you got to respect what he's done there. He's won 3 elections in Monmouth County. Each of the 3 times people counted him out, and each of the 3 times he's been successful. So you need to kind of, say that and acknowledge the fact that he is definitely strong there. You see some, transit-oriented towns like Westfield, Cranford, Summit, Milburn, suburban towns that you saw kind of this NIMBY sentiment kind of take over and trend against the proactive mayors. And then you saw in Bergen County a lot of the municipal elections losing.
Yeah. Well, and when you look down to like even local school board elections, a lot of people first time just even venturing in, a lot of wins for just individuals wanting to get involved. And that kind of goes to the bigger issues, right? Democrats were talking about abortion rights, reproductive, and Republicans were talking more about parental rights. So clearly, I guess the Democrats' message, was that resonating more with voters? Because when you look at some polling, most parents, Republican, Democrat, they want to be involved in their kids' schools. So can you talk a little bit about how those issues played and what we're seeing at that local level? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a parent. I want to be involved in my kids' schools and know what's going on there. But, I'll go back to what I said initially. Like at the end of the day, I think the state is just trending more and more blue. And, we still have this sentiment that we look back 20, 30 years and we say, yeah, we've had Republican governors with Tom Kean and Christie Whitman and Governor Christie. Each is a unique situation. And the state has changed over those period of time. So, it's it's clearly a state that's trending more and more blue, and I think that's really what we saw yesterday, not specific to issues per se.
Yeah. So looking at, we'll be poring over this for days and weeks, the election results, and then looking at the counties, looking at the towns. You're the only person who's announced that you're going to run for governor.
Yeah.
So again, as the Democrats, they had a good night. Right now, what is this telling you first we've got congressional races in 2024, but, people are gearing up. You're obviously gearing up for a run for governor. What is this telling you about what the people of New Jersey want and what issues are important?
Well, look, I think that 2025 is going to continue to show that we're trending in the direction of more and more blue. And I think that's a good thing overall. I think that, people made a big deal about some of Governor Murphy's policies, that they were unpopular. At the end of the day, that didn't prove out. And, I think that we saw yesterday would reaffirm the fact that Tammy Murphy is also considering or likely to run for Senate, because she probably views it as it's a blue state next year, and there's no way that the state will send a Republican to the U.S. Senate. So, when you take away kind of the trend of the state is kind of the bigger takeaway for me than specific issues. So, I do think that the Democrats did a good job targeting the areas that they need to do, but I think they kind of also had the wind at their back a little bit because the state is just trending where it needs to be.
Yeah. Well, let me talk a little bit about yourself as a mayor, making an announcement more than 2 years before the election. That can make for a very long campaign. So why did you decide to make that announcement so early on?
Well, look, I'm running for governor to be a transformative and impactful governor, like I was in Jersey City as the mayor here. We came here, I know people have short-term memories, but when we started 10 years ago, the city was a very, very different place, a place that people weren't clamoring to live in, that weren't on lists as one of the best places to live in the country or the state. We've changed that dynamic, and we want to be consequential and meaningful as a governor the same way we were here. And that takes time on organizing and fundraising and policy initiatives. And you can't do that in 6 months. So, I want to be the type of governor that can change New Jersey for the better and not be beholden to any, political bosses or political machine. All of those things take time. And so we started early in order to make sure we have a long enough runway to do that.
Yeah. One of the things that I noticed when you made your announcement, you talked about 9/11 and how at the time you were working a job at Goldman Sachs. You decided to quit your job, then you joined the Marines, and then that ultimately led to a life of public service. So can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because we've always got huge headlines in New Jersey, and I think it's interesting for our viewers to find out, who is this person? Where did they come from? And what kind of motivated you to leave a lucrative career at Goldman Sachs?
Well, I mean, look, I come from an immigrant family, like a lot of people in New Jersey, first generation American. My family's Holocaust survivors, and I always viewed public service as kind of a partial payment for citizenship. I have a lot to be thankful for. In the days after 9/11, I really had an opportunity to reflect on what I was doing with my life and what I could be doing. And it led me to the conclusion that there were things that were more important than, trading stocks or focusing on my financial well-being. Service was really the calling at that point. So I went to a Marine Corps recruiting station and I enlisted. So I went on the enlisted side, was deployed to Iraq. And that kind of created this trajectory of more focused on public service, which I'm thankful for. It's one of the best decisions I ever made, serving the country. And I was very proud to have the opportunity to do it and thankful to be able to serve Jersey City in a way that I have for the last 10 years in public service as well.
Well, I mean, Hudson County politics is fascinating, and your political career actually began running in a primary for Congress against, at that time, Bob Menendez. You lost, but at the time you were recruited by the then Jersey City Mayor Glenn Cunningham. Then you turned it around and you surprised everybody by winning a seat on the city council. So can you talk a little bit about that journey?
Yeah, I tried to tell you then when I ran against Bob Menendez what was going to happen, but nobody listens. The reality is that, yeah, I ran against him. I thought that it was a race that, he needed opposition on. Obviously, I wasn't successful. I ran for city council against the political machine here, organized the same way I'm running for governor, same premise, won, and then did the same thing as mayor against the political machine here and won. So, have some ability and familiarity with running outside of the traditional infrastructure. And I think that gave me flexibility to be more impactful as a mayor. So all important stuff, and really thankful.
Yeah, and can I just get your thoughts overall? I mean, New Jersey gets such a bad rap in general for some of its really negative headlines, and Bob Menendez is a huge headline right now.
Yeah,
What are your
huge.
thoughts on, innocent until proven guilty, but do you think he should step down now?
Yeah,
Is he able to do his job effectively? What are your thoughts?
I think he should step down, and I think that the Senate should consider expelling him if he doesn't. I mean, it's very, very hard to have somebody with the allegations that are there serving in the U.S. Senate. Of course, he's entitled to go through the court process and the presumption of innocence through that process like anybody else. But when you're in the public trust positions like he is, when you have access to classified information and the allegations that were brought against him, those are serious situations, and he shouldn't be in the position where he can potentially compromise things that are important to New Jerseyans. So I do think that the time has come for him to kind of move on and for New Jersey to turn the page. With regards to New Jersey's overall narrative, I mean, there are a lot of great public servants in New Jersey, and I think that there's a small number that do the wrong thing and give us all a bad name. What I can try to do from my position as mayor is run a scandal-free administration, which we've done for the last 10 years, move the city forward, and just try to do the right thing by our residents. And I think my track record speaks to that.
Yeah, and one other headline that's coming out of Jersey City is former Governor Jim McGreevey is announcing he's running for mayor of Jersey City. So what an interesting circle that is. He was mayor of Woodbridge, obviously governor of New Jersey. He was in the state legislature. Let me get your thoughts on that. Just the circle of the New Jersey politics.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's certainly unconventional. What I will say is that I fully expect the race in 2025 for mayor of Jersey City to succeed me to be very competitive with 4 or 5 great candidates in it. I would expect that you would see Commissioner Bill O'Day, you'll see former Governor McGreevey, you'll see our Council President Joyce Waterman, the councilman from downtown James Solomon in there, and maybe some others. Those 4 candidates are each really qualified and really capable. And so it's going to make for a great discussion here on the direction of Jersey City. And I think it's going to ultimately make for a better city.
Well, Mayor Stephen Fulop, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about everything from the election to this past election to the next upcoming ones. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Jack Ciattarelli is a Republican who ran for governor twice in New Jersey back in 2017 and 2021. He served in the New Jersey General Assembly from 2011 to 2018. He's known for his fiscally conservative, socially moderate positions, as well as his experience as a businessman. In the 2021 gubernatorial election, he almost upset the incumbent Democrat governor, Phil Murphy, and we welcome him to the show. Jack Ciattarelli, it's good to see you. Thank you for coming into studio.
Laura, thank you for having me.
All right, well, let's just first of all talk a little bit about the recent election, topping the ticket, all 120 seats in the state legislature. There were some opportunities in the South, Central, and North where Republicans could make gains, but overall, it was a big night for Democrats, not so much for Republicans. What happened?
Considering the fact that all 120 seats were up, you'd wish you'd see a better turnout. I think turnout was somewhere about 1 out of every 5 registered voters. But the election's over, and we move on. We did hope to win more legislative seats. Despite losing a couple of seats in the legislature, we did have Republicans great wins all around the state at the municipal and county level. So all in all, kind of a break-even kind of night.
All right, well, let's talk about some of the wins because, again, a lot of the headlines, people are talking about how Democrats were the big winners. Phil Murphy is a big winner because in a midterm election, which is really what this is in New Jersey, usually those in power, they see losses. So let's talk about in New Jersey, where were Republicans successful?
In a low turnout election, a couple of things that matter most is, number one, the VBM, vote by mail ballots. And Democrats have a built-in advantage since 2020 when we had an all VBM election. We're still playing catch up with regard to that. And as you know, Laura, money matters. The early estimates where we were outspent, Republicans were at least 5-1. That matters in these local races. So those are two things that worked against us. But again, onward. As one thing I always love about politics, next election is always less than 1 year away.
Right. Well, and that's it. Yeah, it's always on to the next election. When it comes to messaging, though, the Republicans' message really seemed to resonate on paper with the voters. It was about parental rights, is so much of what the Republicans talked about. And no matter if you're Republican or Democrat, upwards of 80% of the electorate agreed that, yeah, parents deserve a right to be heard in the classroom. So we saw a lot of first-time candidates being very successful at the school board level, but that didn't translate to the legislature. Why do you think that is?
I think a couple of things. I mean, listen, there are a lot of single-issue voters out there that it was all about parental rights. There were a lot of single-issue voters out there that it was all about the wind farm off the Jersey Shore. A lot of people were concerned about the rise in crime. We've heard all about the car thefts and the break-ins, those things. But the Dobbs decision, which reversed Roe v. Wade, there's a lot of those kind of issues too. And they expressed their anger by voting against Republicans because of the Dobbs decision.
And that is really what the Democrats focused on so much. They had good candidates, they had a lot of money, and they focused on abortion.
They copied what we saw in last year's congressional races. When you think of the 12 congressional seats in New Jersey, every one of the 12 Democratic congressional candidates spoke about women's health and a woman's right to choose, which I respect. And the legislative candidates this year did the same thing.
Yeah. So it's an off-year election, but New Jersey, Virginia, right, we're the off-year where we elect our governors and our legislatures in those off-year elections. So can you talk about how New Jersey, what was trending in New Jersey, did that play out across the country in other places like Virginia, Ohio, other areas?
Every state's a little different, but I do think the Dobbs decision is affecting elections in all states. A Democrat won in Kentucky. Glenn Youngkin lost both houses in Virginia. The voters of Ohio approved the constitutional amendment to approve the right to abortion. Listen, this decision is weighing in, and I think Republicans have to talk about this issue better. I tried to be a role model for that during the gubernatorial election, but this is very different from 2021. 2021, we made it a referendum on Phil Murphy and him being out of touch and insensitive to New Jersey's plight. We're the most overtaxed people in the country. We had that tape over and over again where he said, if taxes are your issue, we're probably not your state. We kind of got away from that. And yet when people are asked, including the most recent poll here in New Jersey, what's the number one issue? Taxes and affordability. So listen, those social issues, sometimes referred to as culture wars, I refer to them as kitchen table issues, are important. But first and foremost, affordability and taxes in New Jersey are the number one issue.
And you didn't see Phil Murphy actually out on the campaign trail either.
Oh, his legislative candidates were running from him. Yeah. In fact, over the course of the campaign, they were issuing statements that contradicted his positions on education and on energy and on taxes. So 2 years ago, we were able to make it a referendum on Phil Murphy. We'll do that again in 2025 with regard to the last 8 years.
Okay, well, I'm glad you brought up 2025. I'll put it out there. Now that 2023 is over, you've run twice before for governor. You almost beat Phil Murphy in 2021. Are you going to run again?
My plan is to run again. We'll declare sometime in the spring, and we'll get after it. And we'll talk about the things that matter most to New Jerseyans. And that certainly includes property taxes, our income tax structure, New Jersey being the worst state in the country in which to do business. And you'll never hear me say that New Jersey has the best public school system in the country. And the reason is because, as you know, the disparity between our best performing schools and our worst performing schools is the greatest in the nation. And our worst performing schools are the worst in the nation. And we need to fix that, particularly after all the learning loss from the pandemic.
Well, and I think this is what motivated a lot of voters at the local level. And as the days and weeks progress, we'll be able to dive a little bit deeper. But you had some areas where votes were split, where they went more conservative with their school board candidates. But then the legislature, they went with their more liberal, or they went with the Democrats.
And that all depends, again, on the local community, the local candidates, and just the style of that particular campaign. I mean, we had some great wins around the state. In Somerville, we won the mayorship. That's the county seat of Somerset. We won the sheriff's race in Atlantic County for the first time in decades. We now have a shutout of Republicans in Cumberland County. We're on the verge of claiming a county commissioner seat in Bergen and also in Passaic. So there's some good storylines here for the Republican Party. This was not a blue wave. The legislative races are getting all the headlines. But if you look down at the county municipal level, Republicans did pretty well.
Yeah, so as we look to, well, first we're going to have to get through 2024, the congressional races. And, you know, we've got a big Bob Menendez cloud of corruption hanging over the state. And again, looking at how well Democrats did, that could bode well if Phil Murphy's wife decides that she's going to run for U.S. Senate. So I want to get your take before we get too much into 2025, just a little bit about the landscape for 2024. Do Republicans have some opportunities here, especially when you look at someone like Bob Menendez with this scandal hanging over his head?
I'm glad you brought that up because, yes, I'll be declaring in the spring, and my race isn't until 2025. I'm a team player, and my focus will also be on next year's congressional races. We picked up 1 seat last year. I believe we can pick up another 1 or 2 because of people like Bob Menendez, and because I think, in politics, you can believe half of what you read and half of what you hear, but you always believe what you see. And people see what's going on at the border. They see what goes on at the grocery store each week, where they're paying anywhere from $75 to $100 more for their groceries than they ever did before if they're buying groceries for a family. I think all those things will play well into the storyline for Republicans, so long as the House Republicans get their act together. I wasn't real happy with what went on in Washington, D.C. over the Speaker.
Right.
And I thought it was very selfish on the part of Republicans to go through that like 4 to 6 weeks before the election, which can affect people's attitudes on Election Day.
Well, people get they get angry and they just think, well, I'm not going to go. I'm not going to vote. They get fed up.
It either disenfranchises people or, because that's the Republican majority in the House in Washington, D.C., they'll take it out on Republicans.
Yeah.
And so I just thought it was ill-timed with what they did, and then the way they did it didn't help matters.
You were bringing up the cost of living. One thing that I feel like one of the headlines that's gone away is the cost of gasoline. Why aren't we talking about that anymore? It feels almost like that we're just accepting, well, gasoline is going to cost this much, groceries are going to cost this much. We're getting away from the real issues that affect people's ability to live and function in the state. And it's expensive to live. Who can afford to fill up their cars and for groceries? And why aren't people talking about that? The fact that our gas, or we're just going to accept it, that it's going to stay this high?
And this is what made the campaign so successful in 2021. And people might say, Jack, how can you say that? You lost. We had our most successful night in 30 years. We picked up 7 legislative seats. We beat the longest sitting state Senate president in the country. We flipped 134 seats at the municipal and county level. It was a great night for Republicans because I talked about those kitchen table issues. And last night I'm watching Phil Murphy at the Vin Kapal victory celebration, and he was asked why were Democrats successful tonight. He says, because we're talking about kitchen table issues.
Right. Not so much. Right.
So, listen, that's what wins election. Talking about the issues that matter most to people, and you touched upon another one, the price of all things that people have to buy every single day, and gas is one of them.
Yeah. Well, and I also want to talk about, when it comes to education in the state, people do say, oh, we've got the best education. And there are some really bright spots to it. But it's also funded at the local level. It's every single municipality has their own school district and their own bureaucracy, and you see so much being fought again at these local school board levels that really have nothing to do with education, with ensuring the fundamentals. So what are your thoughts about that, and getting away from not saying that gender and these issues don't have a place for discussion, but it seems like it's hijacking fundamental issues of our kids lost 2 years of learning, they haven't closed the gap, and they're not doing well on standardized tests. Granted, standardized test is a whole nother topic, but it's a symptom that, hey, we've got a real problem here.
We've got to get back to basics. We have some school districts, Newark included, where 3 out of 4 students are not on grade level for reading and math. 3 out of 4.
That's incredible.
We're graduating illiterate students. And I will tell you, as a father of 4, 3 of which went to college, 1 went into the trades. My school system treated my trades son like a second-class citizen because he wasn't going to college. Not everybody has to go to college. Not everybody wants to go to college. And as I go around the state and talk to businesses, when you talk to people, what do you need? They need tradespeople. So we need better emphasis on vocational training, but we have to get back to basics. If somebody's not on grade level for reading and math, there needs to be a concentrated curriculum that gets them on grade level for reading and math. I've heard people say to me, well, Jack, we want to spend time teaching them a second language. And I've always said as a father, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll take my chances. If my kid graduates and is not bilingual, but is on grade level for reading and math, he or she's going to be okay.
Right, and this is, and we talked off camera about this. I have children who have special needs. And again, the school district isn't able to meet their needs. The need for state-approved schools that actually can address that. But we don't have skill centers anymore.
We don't have skill centers.
And it isn't just for mechanics. I have a daughter who has an incredible talent vocally. Luckily, I found a great performing arts school for her. And she's thriving now. But, you know, our students, they don't all have to fit into this one particular mold of, well, you need to have calculus under your belt and a 4.0 and your SATs need to be 1600. That just isn't what society really needs. It's important, but that's not what it
You're a great advocate because you've been there and you know. And I have felt very strongly, and I said this as a gubernatorial candidate, and I will again, the state needs to take over the funding of education for special needs students because all districts are all over the place and there's great disparity in the quality of education for the special needs students, and that's not fair.
Right.
So it's something definitely needs to be addressed.
You're going to be talking about in the next weeks and months coming up, affordability, education,
Absolutely.
and quality of life in New
Oh,
Jersey.
yeah. Those are the kitchen table issues here in New Jersey. That's what matters. And listen, I want New Jersey to be a place where people feel confident they can achieve their American dream again.
Right.
You know, we're the most taxed people in the nation, worst place to do business, #1 out migration, and the greatest disparity in the quality of education between our top and worst performing schools. Those things need to be fixed, and they haven't been. Yeah. I even said when I conceded to Phil Murphy back in 2021, I'm not a hyper-partisan. I want him to be successful. I've got 4 children trying to make their way here in New Jersey. They're all in the workforce now, and but I just had this feeling that come 2025, there's still a lot of things that need to be fixed.
Right. And as of right now, the only declared candidate is Steve Fulop. Any other thoughts? Any other thoughts as we close out this segment?
I really don't worry about the competition. I only worry about myself and whether or not my message is resonating with voters. So we'll go out there, we'll be high energy, positive energy, and talk about the issues.
All right. Jack Ciattarelli, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you for having me.
All right. And that's going to do it for today. I'm Laura Jones. Thank you so much for watching New Jersey Politics. We look forward to seeing you back here next time.